There are places in the American wilderness where the map simply stops making sense. We like to believe that with satellite imagery and GPS, every square inch of this continent has been charted, cataloged, and conquered. But anyone who has spent real time in the deep spine of the Appalachians knows that is a lie. There are gullies so deep and canopies so thick that satellites cannot see what lies beneath. In these pockets of shadow, time seems to move differently. Compasses spin without magnetic north, and the forest feels less like a collection of trees and more like a single, massive organism that is tolerating your presence for now. The isolation of the deep woods triggers a very specific kind of psychological unraveling. It starts as peace, the joy of silence, the beauty of the untouched ridge. But as the hours turn into days, and the silence becomes oppressive, the mind begins to turn on itself. You start to notice things that shouldn't be there. A tree that seems to have moved closer while your back was turned. The total absence of bird calls in a section of woods that should be teeming with life. Or the unsettling sensation that the path you are walking on is not leading you out, but guiding you deeper into the throat of the wilderness. Imagine being 20 miles from the nearest paved road. You have plenty of supplies, you have a weapon for protection, and you have years of experience. You should be safe. But then, night falls, and in the darkness, you hear a sound that shatters your understanding of biology. It isn't a bear, it isn't a mountain lion, and it certainly isn't human. It is a sound that suggests something ancient has woken up, and it knows exactly where your tent is pitched. In that moment, your high-tech gear and your experience mean nothing. You are simply prey in a world of predators. The stories we are covering tonight are not quick encounters. They are ordeals. These are accounts of survival against odds that defy logic. We are talking about hikers who walked into valleys that don't appear on any map, hunters who were stalked for days by creatures that mimicked their family members, and solitary caretakers of remote cabins who realized too late that they were under siege by something that wanted to get inside. These are stories of endurance, of sanity being tested to its breaking point, and of the things that watch us from the tree. If you are listening to this, I want you to prepare yourself. This is not a quick scare, this is a descent. We are going to walk every mile with these survivors, feel every drop of cold rain, and hear every twig snap in the darkness. Turn off your lights, put on your headphones, make sure your doors are locked. We are going into the deep woods, and we are going to stay there for a long, long time. Welcome to a special feature-length presentation of Deep Wilderness Horror. Tonight, we are doing something different. Instead of a collection of short encounters, we are focusing on 3 massive, harrowing accounts from the Appalachian and Pacific Northwest regions. These are long-form stories that require patience, as the terror lies not in the jump scare, but in the slow, suffocating realization that escape might not be possible. We will begin with the story of a group of friends who found a trail in the Great Smoky Mountains that technically shouldn't exist, a trail where the sun stopped moving and the geometry of the world broke down. Then, we will move to a snowed-in cabin in Montana, where a writer sought isolation but found himself trapped in a game of cat and mouse with an entity that could unlock doors from the outside. Finally, we will conclude with a search and rescue operation that went horribly wrong, uncovering a secret beneath the forest floor that the government has tried to keep buried. This video is designed to be an immersive experience. It is for the long drives at night, for the rainy evenings, or for those who simply want to lose themselves in the mystery of the unknown. The people in these stories survived, but they did not come back whole. They brought pieces of the darkness back with them, memories that wake them up in a cold sweat years later. If you appreciate this long-form content and want to support the channel's ability to research and produce these documentaries, please destroy that like button and make sure you are subscribed. It tells the algorithm that there is still an audience for long-form storytelling. Now, I need you to get comfortable. Check your surroundings. Are you truly alone? Good. Let's begin with our first story, The Infinite Ridge. My name is Alex, and I need to preface this by saying that I am not a novice hiker. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. The Blue Ridge Parkway was basically my backyard. I know how to read a topographic map, I know how to hang a bear bag, and I know the signs of dehydration and hypothermia. I say this because I need you to understand that what happened to us wasn't a mistake of navigation. We didn't get lost, we were taken. It was late October, 2019. The foliage was at peak leaf, that time of year when the mountains look like they're on fire with reds, oranges, and golds. My 2 best friends, Ben and Sam, had flown in for our annual guys trip. We decided to tackle a section of the backcountry near the border of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, an area known for being rugged and less trafficked by the tourists who clog up Klingman's Dome. We planned a 3-day loop. It was ambitious, about 30 miles, but we were all fit and in our 20s. We parked my truck at a gravel trailhead that was barely marked. The air was crisp, hovering around 50 degrees, perfect hiking weather. We double-checked our pack's water filters, dehydrated meals, first aid, emergency GPS beacon. We were prepared. The mood was high. We were laughing, cracking jokes about work, just happy to be out of the city and away from our screens. We stepped onto the trail at 8 a.m. sharp. The first 6 hours were exactly what we wanted. The trail was steep, burning our calves, but the views from the ridgelines were spectacular. We stopped for lunch on a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley of endless trees. I remember looking at Ben and saying, "This is it, man. This is the life." I wish I could go back to that moment and punch myself in the face. I wish I could drag us back to the truck right then and there. Around 3 p.m., we reached a fork in the trail. This was expected. According to my map, we needed to take the left fork, the Deep Creek Trail, which would loop us down toward our campsite near the water. But when we looked at the wooden signpost, it was damaged. The sign for the left trail was there, weathered and covered in lichen, but there was a new path cut to the right. It looked well maintained, wider than the deer trails we usually ignored, and there was a fresh, hand-carved sign nailed to a tree that read, "Shortcuts to Falls," for miles. Now, rule number 1 of hiking: don't take unmarked shortcuts. I knew this, but Sam had been complaining about a blister forming on his heel, and Ben was eager to see a waterfall. We consulted the map. There was a waterfall marked about 6 miles away on the main trail. If this shortcut was legit, it would shave off 2 miles and get us to camp before sunset. "It looks used," Ben argued, pointing at the boot prints in the mud. "Someone was just here. It's probably a new Forestry Service trail that isn't on your old map." I hesitated. The air felt ... still. You know how the woods usually have a background hum? Wind, bugs, squirrels. As we stood at that fork, the background hum faded. It didn't stop completely, but it muted, like someone turned the volume knob down from a 10 to a 2. "Fine," I said, against my better judgment. "We take it for 1 mile. If it gets rough or starts heading the wrong way, we turn back immediately." No arguments. They agreed. We turned right, stepping onto the unmarked path. As soon as my boot hit the dirt of that new trail, I felt a wave of nausea. It was sudden and violent, like motion sickness. I stumbled. "You good?" Sam asked. "Yeah," I lied, shaking my head. "Just stood up too fast." The nausea passed, but a headache settled behind my eyes, a low throbbing pressure. We hiked on. The trail was beautiful, suspiciously beautiful. The trees here were massive old-growth hemlocks and oaks that must have been 300 years old. The undergrowth was sparse, making it look like a park. We made good time. According to my watch, we had been walking for an hour. We should have covered about 2.5 miles. "We should be hearing the water soon," Ben said from the front. I checked my GPS. The screen flickered, no signal. That wasn't unusual in the deep valleys, but we were on a ridge. I checked my magnetic compass. The needle was floating lazily, drifting left, then right, refusing to settle on north. "Magnetic interference," I mumbled. "Probably iron deposits in the rock." We kept walking. Another hour passed. My legs were starting to burn. By my calculation, we had walked 5 miles. The sign said the falls were 4 miles away. We should have arrived by now. "Hey Alex," Sam said, his voice sounding thin. "Check the sun." I looked up. The sun was hanging just above the western tree line, casting those long golden hour shadows. It looked like it was about 5:30 p.m. "What about it?" I asked. "It was in that exact same spot an hour ago," Sam said. I laughed nervously. "You're tired, man." The sun moved slow. "No." Sam stopped, turning to face me. He looked pale. "I've been watching the shadow of that dead pine on the rock face for 45 minutes. It hasn't moved an inch." "Alex, what time is it?" I looked at my digital watch. The display was blank. Dead battery. Impossible. I had put a fresh battery in before the trip. I looked at Ben. "Check your phone." Ben pulled his iPhone out of his pocket. He tapped the screen. "It's dead," he said, confused. I had 80% charge when we ate lunch. Mine too, Sam said, holding up his black screen. A cold prickle of fear ran down my spine. 3 devices, all dead at the same time, and the compass acting up. Okay, I said, trying to sound calm, the leader voice kicking in. We've entered a dead zone with some magnetic weirdness. It happens. The battery's drained because the phones were searching for signal. We just need to keep moving. The trail has to drop down into the valley eventually. We hiked for what felt like 2 more hours. My legs were trembling with exhaustion. We were thirsty, but we were saving water for camp. The trail didn't drop. It didn't curve. It just stretched on, a straight line along the spine of a ridge that seemed to go on forever. And Sam was right. The sun did not move. It stayed frozen in that late afternoon position, bathing the woods in an eternal, amber twilight. It wasn't getting darker, but it wasn't getting lighter. It was stuck. I don't like this, Ben whispered. I don't like this at all. We need to turn back, I said. We screwed up. We go back to the fork. We turned around. We started hiking back the way we came. We walked for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We never reached the fork. We were walking on a flat, straight path. We should have hit the main trail hours ago, but the path just continued behind us, identical to the path in front of us. Trees, rocks, dirt, and that unmoving, mocking sun. We stopped walking because we physically couldn't take another step. We dropped our packs in the middle of the trail. We're going in circles, Sam said, sitting on the ground, his head in his hands. The trail is straight, I yelled, losing my composure. How can we be going in circles on a straight line? Look at the trees, Alex. Ben pointed. I swear I've seen that blasted lightning-struck oak 3 times now. I looked, it did look familiar. A massive oak tree split down the middle, charred black. Had we passed it? Or did all broken trees just look alike now? We decided to set up camp right there on the trail. We didn't want to go into the woods. We felt exposed, but the idea of stepping off this path felt like stepping off the edge of the world. We ate some granola bars in silence. We waited for nightfall. We waited for the sun to set. It didn't. Hours passed. We sat there in that amber light, exhausted, waiting for the stars. They never came. The sun just hung there, watching us like a singular, unblinking eye. I can't sleep, Ben said. My body says it's midnight, but my eyes say it's 5 p.m. This is messing with my head. Just close your eyes, I said. We rest for a while, then we try again. I managed to doze off, purely from exhaustion. I had a dream that I was walking, and the trees were leaning in, whispering to each other in a language that sounded like static. I woke up to Sam shaking me. Alex, wake up. I opened my eyes. The light was exactly the same. Amber, twilight, what? Is it morning? Look. Sam pointed down the trail, further along the direction we had originally been heading before we turned back. About 200 yards away, standing in the middle of the trail, was a figure. It was too far to make out details, but it looked like a hiker. They were wearing a red jacket and a large pack. They were standing perfectly still, facing away from us. Hey, Ben shouted, jumping up. Hey, we need help. We're lost. The figure didn't move. They didn't turn around. Let's go, I said. Maybe they have a working GPS. Maybe they know the way out. We left our tent set up and jogged toward the figure. Hey, I yelled again. As we got closer, maybe 50 yards away, the figure started walking. They didn't turn to look at us. They just started walking away, matching our pace. Wait up, Sam yelled. We started running. The figure started running, but they ran ... wrong. Their upper body was perfectly still, rigid, while their legs moved in a blur. It looked like a bad animation in a video game. They glided over the rocks and roots without stumbling. We chased them for maybe 5 minutes, adrenaline masking our fatigue. The figure rounded a bend in the trail, the first bend we had seen in ours. We got him, I panted. We sprinted around the corner. The trail ended. It didn't fade out. It stopped abruptly at a sheer cliff face. A wall of gray granite shooting up 500 feet and dropping down 500 feet, a dead end. There was no red jacket, no hiker, nowhere they could have gone. Where did he go? Ben wheezed, spinning around. He was right here. I looked at the ground. The dirt was soft. There were our boot prints, frantic deep scuffs from running. But where the figure had run, nothing. The dirt was smooth, undisturbed, and then, For the first time since we stepped on the trail, the silence broke. From the top of the cliff face, 500 feet above us, we heard a sound. It was laughter. But it wasn't human laughter. It sounded like a hyena trying to mimic a human laugh, high-pitched, manic, and overlapping, as if 3 or 4 voices were laughing at once from the same throat. Hey dash, hey dash, hey dash, hey dash, hey dot dot dot. Run, I whispered. What? Run, I screamed. We scrambled back down the trail, abandoning the dignity of hiking for a full-blown panic sprint. The laughter from the cliff edge didn't fade. It seemed to echo off the trees themselves, bouncing around us, creating a disorientation so severe I nearly ran face first into an oak trunk. We didn't stop until we reached our makeshift campsite, where our packs lay in the dirt like gravestones. We collapsed, gasping for air, lungs burning with the metallic taste of adrenaline. Ben was sobbing quietly, a sound that terrified me more than the laughter, because Ben was the rock of our group, the guy who never cracked. Did you see it? Ben whispered, his eyes wide and fixed on the canopy above. When we looked up at the cliff, did you see what was making the noise? No, I said, and it was the truth. I hadn't looked. I didn't want to look. It was tall, Ben said, his voice trembling. It was like a piece of the rock peeled away and stood up. It didn't have a face, Alex. It just had a mouth. Stop it, Sam snapped. Just stop. We need to think. But thinking was impossible in that amber twilight. My body clock screamed that it was 3 a.m., that we should be asleep. But the sun remained frozen in that 5:30 p.m. position, casting long, stretching shadows that looked like grasping fingers. We huddled together in the center of the trail, weapons drawn. I had my knife. Sam had a hatchet. We watched the woods on either side of the path were dark, dense, and silent. The path itself was the only thing illuminated by that false sun. It was then I realized the trap. The path wasn't a road to safety. It was a feeding trough. The entity, whatever it was, wanted us to stay on the path. It was keeping the light on to keep us here, exposed, while it watched from the darkness of the true forest. We have to leave the trail, I said. Sam looked at me like I was insane. You want to go into the brush, in the dark, with that thing out there. The trail is the trap, Sam. I grabbed his shoulder. Don't you get it? The sun hasn't moved. The geometry is wrong. The GPS is dead. This trail isn't on the map because it doesn't exist in the real world. If we want to get back to reality, we have to walk off the edge of this reality. We have to go into the woods. Ben refused. He curled into a ball, clutching his knees. I'm staying here. The sign said for miles. Maybe we just missed a turn. I'm staying on the path. We argued for what felt like ours. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Finally, I made the hardest decision of my life. I told Ben we were going to scout the perimeter, just 10 feet into the woods, to see if we could find a game trail. He nodded, but he wouldn't move. Sam and I stepped off the pristine, hard-packed dirt of the trail and pushed into the wall of rhododendrons. The exact second the branches closed behind us, cutting off our view of the trail, the world slammed into darkness. It wasn't a fade. It was an instant switch. 1 second, we were in amber twilight. The next, we were in pitch black night. The air temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly. And the sound returned. Crickets. The wind in the upper canopy. The hoot of an owl. The natural world crashed back in on us with the force of a physical blow. I fumbled for my headlamp, shaken, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness. We were standing in thick brush. I looked at my watch. The digital display was working. It read 2:14 a.m. We're out, Sam whispered, tears streaming down his face. Oh my God, Alex, we're out, Ben. I spun around to go back to the trail to get him. I pushed through the bushes, expecting to step back onto that flat dirt path. I stepped out onto a paved road. I froze. It was the Blue Ridge Parkway. We were standing on the asphalt. There was no dirt trail, no amber light, no cliff face, just the double yellow line of the highway. Ben, I screamed. I ran up and down the road, shining my light into the woods. Ben, we searched until the sun came up, the real sun, rising in the east like it was supposed to. We flagged down a Ranger truck at 7 a.m. We told him everything, or at least, the version of everything that wouldn't get us committed to a psych ward. We said we got separated. We said Ben had stayed behind. They launched a massive search. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers. They searched for weeks. They found our campsite on the main trail, the one we had intended to take. Our gear was there, untouched. But they never found the shortcut. They never found the cliff face. And they never found Ben. I still hike, but I don't go deep anymore. And I have a new rule. If I see a trail that isn't on the map, no matter how well maintained it looks, no matter how much time it saves, I turn around and I run. Because I know that somewhere, in a fold of reality that shouldn't exist, Ben is still sitting on that trail, waiting for a sun that will never set. Isolation is a drug. At first it feels like a cleanse, a way to strip away the noise of modern life. But take too much of it, and it becomes a poison. This next story is about a man named Jack, a freelance writer from Chicago who wanted to escape the noise of the city to finish his novel. He didn't just want quiet, he wanted silence. He found a listing online for a caretaker position at a luxury property in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. The owners were a wealthy tech couple who spent their winters in Bora Bora and needed someone to live in the house to keep the pipes from freezing and ensure the roof didn't collapse under the snow load. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. Free rent in a multi-million-dollar mansion, fully stocked pantry, and absolute solitude for 4 months. Jack drove out in November, his SUV loaded with groceries, books, and his typewriter. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture. It was structured like a V, jutting out over a steep ravine. The most striking feature was the living room. It was floor-to-ceiling glass. 3 massive walls of windows that offered a 270-degree view of the surrounding forest and the mountains beyond. During the day, it was breathtaking. It felt like living inside a nature documentary. But Jack quickly learned that glass walls work both ways. During the day, you look out. At night, when the lights are on inside, the windows become black mirrors. You can't see anything but your own reflection, but everything in the woods can see you. You become an actor on a brightly lit stage, performing for an audience hidden in the dark. The first month passed without incident. The snows came heavy and fast, burying the access road and turning the world into a landscape of white and gray. Jack settled into a routine. Write in the morning, shovel snow in the afternoon, read by the fire at night. But in mid-December, the atmosphere shifted. It started with the footprints. Jack went out one morning to check the propane tank levels. There was a fresh layer of powder on the deck, maybe 2 inches, that had fallen overnight. He noticed a trail of prints circling the house. At first he assumed it was a wolf or a mountain lion. He walked over to inspect them. They weren't paw prints, they were boot prints. Someone had walked up the driveway, circled the entire house 3 times, and then vanished. The tracks didn't lead away. They just stopped at the edge of the deck, as if the person had leaped off the ravine or flown away. Jack felt a cold knot in his stomach. The nearest neighbor was 10 miles away. The road was impassable without a snowmobile. He went back inside and locked the heavy oak doors. He checked the security system. It was online, but no alarms had been triggered. He told himself it was probably a ranger checking on the property, or maybe a lost hunter. He tried to write, but he couldn't focus. He kept looking at the glass walls. The snow was falling harder now, blurring the tree line. 2 nights later, Jack was sitting in the living room. It was 11 p.m. He had a single lamp on by his reading chair. The rest of the house was dark. Suddenly, the motion sensor floodlights on the back deck triggered. Current flooded the snow-covered deck in harsh white LED light. Jack jumped up, his heart hammering. He looked out. The deck was empty. The snow was undisturbed. Just the wind, he muttered, or a falling branch. The lights clicked off after 2 minutes, plunging the deck back into darkness. 10 seconds later, they clicked on again. Jack walked closer to the glass, cupping his hands around his eyes to shield the reflection. He scanned the tree line illuminated by the floodlights. He saw nothing, just the white trunks of aspens and the falling snow. Then, he heard it, a sound coming from the front door. Click-clack, the sound of the handle being depressed, then the heavy thud of a shoulder hitting the wood. Someone was trying to get in. Jack didn't own a gun. He grabbed a heavy fire poker from the hearth and ran to the hallway. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "I have a gun. Leave now." Silence. Then, from the back of the house, the glass living room, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Tapping, tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of a fingernail against glass. He spun around. The living room was dark again. He couldn't see anything. He backed into the kitchen, grabbing a knife from the block. He spent the night huddled in the pantry with the door locked, shivering, listening to the wind howling around the eaves. The next morning, the sun was blindingly bright off the snow. Jack felt foolish. Daylight has a way of burning away the fears of the night. He grabbed a shovel and went outside to inspect the front door. There were footprints. But they weren't boots this time. They were bare feet, human feet, in sub-zero temperatures. The prince walked up to the door, shuffled around, and then walked around the side of the house to the back deck. Jack followed them. They went up the stairs to the deck and stopped right in front of the giant glass wall where he had been sitting. There, on the glass, about 6 feet up, was a smear. It was a handprint, a greasy, dirty handprint pressed against the pristine window. Jack packed his bag immediately. He didn't care about the contract. He didn't care about the money. He was leaving. He called the owners, but the line was dead. The storm had likely knocked out the phone lines. He had no cell service in the valley. He was trapped. He spent the day boarding up the smaller windows with spare plywood he found in the garage, but he couldn't board up the massive glass walls. There was too much surface area. He felt exposed, like a bug in a jar. Night fell early, around 4:30 p.m. Jack turned on every light in the house. He figured if he couldn't hide, he might as well eliminate the shadows. He sat in the center of the living room, the fire poker in one lap, the kitchen knife in the other. At 9 p.m., the power went out. The house plunged into absolute, suffocating blackness. The silence was instantaneous. The hum of the refrigerator, the whir of the heater, it all died. Jack stood up, fumbling for his flashlight. He clicked it on. The beam was a pathetic sliver of light in the cavernous room. Then, the sound came from the front door again. Click. But this time it wasn't locked. Jack had checked it 3 times. He knew it was locked, but he heard the bolt slide back, creak. The front door opened. A blast of freezing air rushed through the hallway, extinguishing the dying embers in the fireplace. "Hello," Jack screamed. "Get out." He heard wet footsteps on the hardwood floor. Slap, slap, slap. Jack retreated toward the glass wall, putting his back against it. He shined his light down the hallway. A figure stepped into the beam. It was naked, a man extremely tall, with limbs that seemed too long for his body. His skin was pale gray, the color of a corpse that had been in the water too long. He had no hair, but it was his face that broke Jack's mind. He didn't have eyes. Where the eyes should have been, there was just smooth skin, but he had a mouth that was smiling way too wide, revealing rows of small, sharp teeth like a deep-sea fish. The creature tilted its head, sensing the light. Jack had whispered. It wasn't a mimic. It didn't sound like Jack. It sounded like the house itself, speaking creaking wood and settling foundation. Jack turned and did the only thing he could do. He grabbed a heavy brass statue from the side table and swung it with all his might against the glass wall. The safety glass shattered into a million diamonds. The cold air hit him like a physical blow. Jack leaped through the hole, cutting his hands and face, landing in the deep snow on the deck. He didn't look back. He vaulted over the railing and tumbled down the ravine, sliding and crashing through the brush in the dark. He reached the access road and ran. He ran for 5 miles in deep snow, barefoot, wearing only jeans and a sweater. He barely remembers the run. He remembers the cold, and he remembers the sound of that wet slapping following him, always just at the edge of his hearing. He was found by a snowplow driver the next morning, half frozen, walking down the state highway. He lost 3 toes to frostbite. When the police went to the cabin, they found the front door wide open. The house was trashed, furniture overturned, walls slashed, but there were no footprints leaving the house, only the ones entering. Jack never wrote another book. He lives in a small apartment in Arizona now, in the city, where there are street lights and neighbors and noise. He refuses to be alone. He says that sometimes, when it gets quiet, he can still hear the sound of bare feet slapping on the floor, getting closer. There are things beneath the Appalachians that geology cannot explain, vast networks of caverns that breathe. This final story comes from a retired search and rescue coordinator named Sarah, who worked in the Smoky Mountains for 20 years. She has seen it all: people who vanished into thin air, children found miles away from where they couldn't possibly have walked. But there is one case file that she keeps in a locked box in her attic, a case that officially never happened. It was July 2014. A call came in about a missing group of Spelunkers cave explorers, 3 college students, experienced, well-equipped. They had filed a plan to explore a known cave system near the Tennessee border, but they hadn't checked in. Sarah assembled a team of 5 elite cavers and SAR personnel. They arrived at the cave entrance, a jagged maw on the side of a limestone cliff hidden by dense laurel. They found the student's car parked at the trailhead. They descended into the dark. The first few hours were routine. The cave was mapped for the first 2 miles. They checked the choke points, the drop-offs. Nothing. Then, they found a rope. It was tied to a stalagmite and dropped down into a fissure that wasn't on any map. It was a tight squeeze, a vertical drop into the unknown. They went off map. Sarah radioed to base. "We're going down." They rappelled down the fissure. It opened up into a massive chamber, big enough to fit a cathedral. The air down here was different, warmer, humid, and it smelled like ozone and copper, like old blood. They swept the chamber with high-powered lights. In the center of the room, they found the students' gear, backpacks, helmets, backup lights, all piled neatly in a pyramid. Why would they take their helmets off? One of the team members asked. It was rule number 1 of caving. Never take off your protection. Sarah walked over to the pile. On top of the pyramid of gear was a video camera. It was a GoPro. She picked it up. The battery was dead, but she swapped it with a fresh one from her pack. She turned it on and played the last file. The footage was chaotic. It showed the 3 students running through the dark, their lights jerking wildly. They were screaming, but they weren't screaming words. They were just screaming in pure, primal terror. Then, the camera fell. It landed face up. The frame showed the ceiling of the cave. For 10 minutes, nothing happened in the video. Just a dark ceiling. Then, a face moved into the frame. It wasn't one of the students. It was pale, almost translucent. It had no hair. Its eyes were large and black, with no whites. It looked into the lens, curious. It blinked sideways. Then, it opened its mouth, and the camera's microphone picked up a sound, a series of clicks and whistles, complex and rapid. A language. The creature reached down with a hand that had 6 fingers and picked up the camera. The video cut to static. Sarah stared at the small screen, her blood running cold. "We need to leave," she said. "No, we haven't found them," her partner argued. "We are not finding them," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We are leaving." As they turned to head back to the rope, their lights caught something on the far wall of the chamber. It was covered in drawings, not ancient cave paintings, fresh scratches in the soft limestone. They were drawings of the surface, drawings of the sun, drawings of houses, and drawings of people being dragged down into holes in the earth. Then they heard the clicking. It came from the ceiling, a dry chittering sound, like 1,000 insects rubbing their legs together. Sarah shined her light up. The ceiling was moving. It wasn't rock, it was hundreds of them, pale humanoid shapes clinging to the stalactites like bats. They were waking up. "Run," Sarah screamed. The team sprinted for the rope. The clicking turned into a shrieking roar. Bodies began to drop from the ceiling, landing with wet thuds on the cave floor. They moved on all fours, impossibly fast, skittering over the rocks. The team reached the rope. Sarah went last, covering the rear with her flare gun. She fired a flare into the massive creatures. The red light illuminated a nightmare sea of pale limbs and black eyes. They scrambled up the fissure, jamming their ascenders, scraping their skin raw. The creatures were right behind them. Sarah could feel the wind of their claws swiping at her boots. They cleared the squeeze and didn't stop. They ran through the mapped section of the cave, fueled by terror. They burst out of the entrance into the humid July night and didn't stop until they reached the trucks. They radioed it in as a structural collapse. They said the cave was unstable and the students were buried under tons of rock. It was a lie. The military arrived 2 days later and poured concrete into the entrance. The official story is that it was sealed for safety. Sarah retired the next week. She knows what is down there. She knows that the Appalachian Mountains are hollow, like an ant farm, and she knows that sometimes the ants get hungry. The stories we have shared tonight are reminders that we are not the masters of this planet. We are tenants, living on the surface of a world that is much older, much deeper, and much darker than we care to admit. Whether it is a trail that traps you in time, a cabin that becomes a fishbowl for the things in the snow, or a civilization beneath our feet that views us as cattle, the lesson is the same. There are places where we do not belong. The next time you feel the call of the wild, the urge to go off trail, to find that secluded spot where no one else goes, listen to that small voice in the back of your head, the one that tells you to turn back, the one that tells you that the silence isn't peaceful, but predatory, because that voice is the only thing standing between you and the deep woods. Thank you for listening. If you made it this far, you were brave. Please subscribe and turn on notifications. I have more stories to tell, and the files are opening. Until next time, stay in the light.